Hi, I'm Gary Thompson. I'm the president of Exec. Super excited for this session today on MarTech and AdTech. And we're going to dive deep into this topic with two really amazing guests, as well as our co-host, Brian Burke, VP of Product at Data, and Robert Dowling, CEO at Hudson Cutler. I know a number of folks are super excited about this conversation, which is why we're recording it, because lots of folks want this link to be able to really dive into this topic more deeply. For those that are new to Exec, we're about a 20-year-old organization. We're actually a global executive community. We're a VP plus organization for the Global 1000, connecting thought leaders and expertise. And Robert knows, being a member of our membership offering, Exec, how we connect folks behind the scenes for conversations like that, as well as to the latest thinking on MarTech and AdTech, like we are doing today. So with that, Brian, thank you for co-hosting this and making the session possible. Welcome and say a quick welcome to our guests.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. Thanks for having us here today. Um, just a little bit of background on myself and my company. For those that don't know, AdData, I'm the vice president of product for AdData. AdData is an identity solutions provider, both in the fraud and marketing services space, and we've been around for about 20 years. I've been with AdData just a little under 2 years, but I've been in the consumer identity data space for probably about 2 decades and a half, so quite a while.
Yeah. Well, and as I've gotten to know your company, Brian, as we've prepared for this, right? Like, I mean, what you guys are doing at Data, I think is really interesting, right? Which is, we're really transforming beyond email as a connection method, right? To a really, like you said, identity layer, which I know we're going to dive into more deeply. So watching the transformation, I know how excited they were to get you on board, as VP of product, because I think that's when we started to get to know each other. So thanks for making this possible. And Robert, a quick introduction yourself on behalf of Hudson Cutler, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Brian. I am Robert Dowling. I've been involved with the Executive Council and Exec for its entire 20-year history. I have participated in a number of these events, both in Gary's seat as the interviewer and now here as an interviewee. One thing you should know about me: I am the second born, so the black sheep, and I look at things from that perspective, and have been a long time marketing guy. I came up big agency side, ended up being president of Weber Shandwick, and then a similar role at Fleischman Hillard before starting my own agencies about a decade ago, including Hudson Cutler. And we work with top tier brands, Zoom and Citizens Financial Group, IBM. We just did a big rebrand for BMW that's very relevant to this conversation. And I'm really excited to be here. Thank you, Gary.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And guys, thanks for those introductions. And just knowing how much we have to cover, I think I'm just going to dive right in, if that's okay with both of you. So kind of big picture, right? Starting, 30,000 feet. And we'll start with you on this one, Robert, right? And I know with all that list of clients that you just talked about, right? Like, as you advise a CMO, right, a chief marketing officer today, when you look to 2026, what do you think they should be thinking about and preparing for as we go into the new year?
Well, a lot of the conversations today are focused on technological change, and that is a major driving force and a big topic for today. But I think if you want to do a big picture look at what's really happening, we're facing unprecedented change on a much more macro scale. We have generational change, massive generational change. We have a wealth transfer happening that also is really dramatic. And we're seeing a lot of behavioral change. This new generation doesn't roll the way we did, and they speak a different language, and they operate in a different sphere. They also carry influence in a completely different way. So we're not just talking about adapting our technologies or even our offerings, but how we behave with this new generation. And that is an essential starting point for any brand. And most of the brands we're dealing with, doesn't matter if it's IBM or BMW, these guys are struggling with those same massive forces of change. What happens when the ultimate driving machine, that signifier of success, cash and prizes, which is so relevant to boomers, who made
Yep.
it the top brand, no longer speaks the language of a new generation.
Yeah, I mean it's great insights, Robert, right? And when you talk about that generational wealth, we have a whole series of visionary vaults, and I remember the one that we did with Jennifer Wines, who wrote Invisible Wealth, and Cameron Dawson, who's at New Edge Wealth. I mean, like big things are changing. And Brian, on the technology side, right? Two big trends I think over the last couple of decades, right? Technology and everything that Robert just spoke about are no longer separate, right? You don't decide to do one and then go get yourself some technology, right? I mean, you've been at the forefront of in this generational change, the way we're communicating is changing. But that said, and I'll let you tell your story yourself, but like when you think about the way people communicate and what that communication method looks like to identity, how do you see sort of the tech, the MarTech, the AdTech part of what Robert just talked about evolving?
Yeah, I think it's part of the generational shift that we just spoke about. But I think gone are the days where marketers can just blast blindly messages. Today that comes off as tone deaf in the best case, or in the worst case, offensive and can do serious brand reputational damage. And so I think been an ever increasing trend to not just personalize, but to really focus around relevancy. And are you contacting the right person at the right time with the right message? And is it something that they have consented to be a part of? Do they want to be a part of that conversation? And so it's a lot more challenging for both data companies and marketers to meet the demands of a customer that has those expectations, because it's not a one size fits all message. It's got to be tailored to what they're looking for. Part of that's been driven by general trends around privacy and legislation restrictions. But I think that
Mm.
at a broader level, the regulations really just kind of echo where the consumer wants to be in terms of the right message at the right time, and not
Mm.
getting spammed by solicitations that aren't relevant.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating, fascinating insights for sure. Yeah, and you can't help but think about the fact that with all these technology changes and like you said, you can't just blast anymore, right? This is not the digital version of direct mail, right, Robert? I mean, this is something altogether different. And staying on this topic just a brief moment before we kind of get into the marketing stack and just AI, but like, um, that brand authenticity and that voice and that generational change that you were tapping into, Robert, how do you see that kind of influencing the way you guide your clients to communicating with folks at a strategy level?
Yeah, I mean, you really do have to look at this. First, there's a lot of great research. This is I mean, not only is technology an enabler of deeper connections with the demographics that you target, but looking at this in terms of all the layers that are happening, right? Yes, generation and wealth change. Yes, behavioral change, technology change. How are these interrelated? And also, in what environment are we talking about? Are we talking about, the your home environment, your work environment, or that third space, which may be the coffee shop or your place in Costa Rica? Also, the platforms have changed. We, used to see email as kind of the standard for communication. And now we've got more collaboration tools, which have evolved. I mean, we're doing a lot of work with Zoom, and there's no doubt that the collaboration and communication platforms, whether it's Teams or Zoom or Google or others,
Yep.
are now the starting point for many work engagements, and the technologies that surround them, whether they're embedded AI or what have you. That's also a change driver. So,
Yeah. It's
who are
it's a
your audiences? Where are they living? How are they behaving? How are they communicating? Uh, Really, everything is now in play.
Yeah. And yeah, I'm going to take these questions that we talked about before the session kind of in reverse here. Because one of the things I've learned doing a number of the AI sessions that we've done with some of our other partners, at Exec, you really learn that AI is at the top of a whole lot of decisions that start at the bottom, right? And data. right? Good data, good governance, good clean data is a really important part of like being underneath all of this, right, Brian? And so, when you think of email, but email as data and privacy and identity, how do you at Data kind of see that environment evolving? And as VP of products, where do you see it heading?
Yeah, just in general, typically when people think of identity, you think of old school marketing, but be it direct mail or e-marketing or telephone-based marketing. But really, in today's world, particularly with the programmatic lens, it's more of an enabler than anything. And so, um, and we'll probably get into it in a bit in terms of trends around privacy, but a lot of the privacy trends as well as the walled garden trends have really driven organizations to really double down and focus on their first party data
Hmm.
and what, a data strategy around that. Well, part of that first party data strategy is making sure that the data is clean, that it's accurate, that it's the right touch point for a consumer. Like in the case of email, someone may have a 10-year-old Hotmail email address. It's a valid email, but that's probably not the one that you want to serve impressions to or do marketing to.
I know somebody with a Netscape.net address. I mean, you want to talk about old school, right?
Right. I think identity remains foundational within this space, but it's
Hmm.
evolved from being always the endpoint, from a delivery standpoint to really the enabler and the glue behind the scenes. And
Hmm.
so, from a solutions provider perspective, like data, as well as a first party brand or a marketer, investments have to be made and nurtured around investing in the data, making sure it's current, making sure it's accurate, because otherwise, things go terribly awry because it's almost like a daisy chain of linkages to get to the customer or get to the consumer.
Yeah.
And if you start from a false point, it's a lot of trouble. I just did a white paper with our marketing team that we'll be putting out soon around AI hallucinations and identity. And
Hmm.
for anybody that's worked with AI, one of the things that I think is pretty obvious is that AI loves to be very definitive about the answer. Yes, this is the answer, and here's the way you act upon it. But that's built upon a layer of assumptions, and particularly when it
Hmm.
comes to identity, you can go terribly wrong very quickly.
Yeah.
People move, data decays, data rots, changes. People change their name, they get married, divorced. All types of traditional, old school brick and mortar type identity things
Yeah.
happen, but those have tremendous ramifications in the digital space. And so,
Sure.
um, AI can't necessarily solve for all those problems.
Yeah,
It has to have a good foundational layer to work from.
well,
It's
100%, Brian. The starting point here is, I mean, we can call it data, we can call it our knowledge or understanding, our research or our insights into the communities we serve, we're involved with, we sell to, or what have you. The better we understand, the more appropriate our action, the less likely we're going to step on toes and end up in a Jaguar situation, right? We are, primarily concerned with understanding the behaviors and interests and how this new generation rolls without, by the way, alienating our current base of customers.
Well, and I suspect a lot of our guests that are listening to this now and will be listening to it in the near future probably know this pretty well, but just to kind of do some level setting, right? So Brian, so there's first party data. Kind of walk us through like what a first, second, third party data chain kind of looks like and why that matters to the marketers and to identity.
Yeah, if we were to rewind the clock back, a decade or and a half or so, there was a lot of marketing that was done primarily around the third-party data space, where um, an organization might buy a list, a marketing
Hmm.
list, there, of unknown consumers who are not currently doing business with a given brand, and it could be through telemarketing means or email, e-marketing, or even programmatic. And customer or brands would kind of just blast their message out blindly. Unfortunately, some of that still goes on, but I think most of us now have learned how to filter that out. Um, that would be, third party data. One of the challenges with third party data is that because there's um, not a relationship there between the brand and the
Mm.
third party, the consumer has a level of or a lack of trust in that marketing.
Yeah.
But then also with the walled gardens and some of the privacy laws that have and restrictions that have come along, there's an increasing trend for organizations to not reach out to customers unless they have consent, unless the consumer wants to be notified. Consumer has a right to opt out from receiving those messages. And so it's much easier for an organization to market to consumers they've already had a touch point with, or existing
Right.
customers, or perhaps
Yeah.
lapsed customers. And so in that case, those lapsed customers or existing customers, those would be first party consumers that an organization has already got a relationship with, already has a touch point with. One of the
Mm.
challenges, even with first party data, though, is that oftentimes that data can also start to decay. And a great example of that would be in the travel and entertainment industry. If it's like a cruise ship or something like that, um, not everyone
Mm.
takes a cruise every year. There might be someone that
Yeah.
does it on their 5-year anniversaries, or when they have a kid, or when they
Yeah, the
get married.
likelihood of change in between
Right.
cruise one and cruise two could be a really long time,
Could
right?
I've
be
got
could
some
be several
great
years.
data on cruising and cruisers and who repeats and who doesn't and why. If so, anybody hit me up after.
Yeah. And that's just one example. But so a lot of times, even in
Yeah.
the case of a first party data set, um, there could be records in there that may be questionable. The consumer might have changed, had a lifestyle change, moved.
Yeah.
Their demographics certainly have shifted.
Hmm.
Their wealth affluence has possibly shifted. And
Right.
so, as a first party organization, it's incumbent upon that organization to run a good marketing program to continue to nurture and understand their first party consumers, so that
Yeah.
um, again, you don't want to be blindly just blasting out to your first party consumers, because then it's almost offensive, because
If you're like, hey, I thought we
I
thought you
thought you
knew
knew
me,
me.
right? Yeah, I thought you
I
knew
did a
me.
cruise with you a few years back, and now you're giving me these tone deaf messages. And
Yeah.
so there's just a real need to understand who
Hmm.
a brand's consumers are, and make sure that the data and identity information is current, as well as the propensities and insights on the
Yeah.
consumer.
That's a great insight, Brian. And again, these sessions always go so fast. I mean, I'm looking at the clock going, man, there's so much stuff we got to get to still, but this is so interesting already. And the thing I can't help but think about, Robert, and then we'll kind of pivot into AI and privacy and some of that, is that first party relationship really is a brand relationship. You teased it out a minute, with Jaguar, right? And that brand relationship that they've had for decades. And again, your clients like BMW and IBM, long-standing brands. Zoom, we had the former CIO for Zoom as one of our guests early on in the pandemic, like newer brands. How does that brand relationship matter to all of the tech stuff that Brian just talked about in that first party relationship?
You hit the nail on the head, Gary. It is about relationships. And given the data available, given the number of touch points we typically have with audiences and consumers, given our ability to customize messages, et cetera, that relationship and every interaction that defines it should give our, like any relationship, it should give the other party confidence that we understand them, confidence that we're paying attention,
Mm.
confidence that we respect their privacy and security, and we're going to protect the data, and that we actually add some value in some place. We're sending them something that they go, oh, wow, I'm not going to unsubscribe from this, or I'm not going to, send a note back saying, WTF, why are you sending me this? Instead, I may forward it to a friend. I may reply. I may click learn more or buy. So relationship is at the heart of that. But all of the touch points and all of the technologies, all of the data, all of the things that we do, from the creative on down to the simple, did the website work when I clicked on it? And
Hmm.
I mean, there's a lot to be considered here, and every single touch point has to be, failure proof.
Yeah, yeah, no, and And you were teasing it out a little bit there, Brian, right? Like, which is that notion of personalization to where you know me, but not so personalized to where it feels creepy, right? And that balance, which kind of, takes us into this world of AI where it's like, okay, now we've got a whole new identity, right? This digital identity, which can have hallucinations, like you said, if you're not feeding it with all the right data and the right models. Robert, from a strategy standpoint with your clients, I mean, how are they thinking about not AI necessarily in general, but AI is informing how they stand up their marketing strategies?
Yeah, I think the days of conversation about are we really in the age of AI and is this a thing are over. We know AI is the driving force of so many different components. It's not just AI search or LLM search, but AI driven content, AI driven issues around privacy and truth and AI driven commerce. AI, so it's here, and and it's a powerful tool, young and still finding its feet, and we're still figuring out how to deploy and implement. And there are tens of thousands of trials happening for every single deployment, especially with the larger brands, right?
Yeah.
It's measure twice, cut once sensibility, because and there's a big investment and a lot of time and energy being thought about. But again, AI has the power not only to address each one of the touch points in a relationship, but to address it in a very unique and powerful and customizable, hyper personal way.
Yeah.
And for a digital first generation that has come up uncomfortable with human interaction. There's
Hmm.
always a screen in between,
Yeah.
and often looks to crowdsource an opinion, or looks to a TikTok, or looks to a Claude or Chat GPT for an opinion or a fact. That is a very both powerful but also really is something that we need to pay a lot of attention to as a marketer, because
Yeah.
this generation moves fast.
Well, and what's interesting is we did a session with the CMO of the Boston Red Sox, and actually in a suite at Fenway, which is super cool. But he made the point, like, we've got all this content, right? And I'm going to bring this question to you, Brian. Like, we got all of this content. We can't scale our staff anyway to take all of this 100 years of history and bring it down to the one, right? And so AI for them is a great way to do that. And so, Brian, when you think about AI at data, right? I'd love you to think about it and share with our audience your thinking two ways, right? A, how is at data itself in its product strategy, and you as its leader, kind of thinking of AI enabling what you do, and then looking out to the incredible list of clients. I was on your website just first thing this morning, just seeing all the people you work with already. How are you advising them to think about AI in light of identity and data?
Yeah, I would say we use AI in a lot of different spots throughout the organization. If I start at the back of the house in the data science organization, one of the big things that we focus on, not just around the factualness of the identity, but would be signals that we see associated with the identity. You could consider them like heartbeat signals. Is that identity still there? Are they
Hmm.
taking certain actions? Are they engaged? And those type of things. And so that, as you might imagine, that creates a slew of raw signals that really work really well from an AI perspective and a machine learning perspective in terms of us helping build out layers and signals around trust, around confidence of the identity, not just in the marketing space, but we also have a division of our organization that's focused around fraud and risk. And so you might imagine that really resonates in that space. And then,
Yeah.
as we look to our customers, I've actually seen a shift over the last few years where in the past, a lot of our customers would be looking for scale, help us identify and verify as many of our records as possible because we just want to blast everyone. And
Hmm.
and that is no longer the case. Now there really is a focus around quality and refinement and only doing outreach to their best customers, their most engaged customers, their customers that were active in the last few months or the last quarter. And so we're taking those machine learning and AI generated signals and helping our customers get a really deep understanding of their customers. And so, I think days gone, as we mentioned, gone are the days
Yeah.
where people just want to blast out marketing to anybody and everybody. But there is a strong need to better understand who among a given customer set is engaged, who might be the right customer to reach out to,
Yeah.
based on certain signals that have been
Well,
seen.
and in a lot of ways, right, Brian? I mean, like, marketing isn't just talking, marketing is listening. So that's a really interesting insight, like of using AI to scale the ability to catch, the signals, right? Like, I mean, can't help but think, Robert, like if Jaguar was smart enough, like BMW, to have you, as their agency, they might have caught the signals sooner, to Brian's point of like, oh boy, we are on the wrong track, right? I mean, to where you didn't have to wait for sales data to tell you like you did something dumb.
Yeah, we are, in addition to all of this unprecedented change, we are in a strange social, cultural, political world. It's more divisive than it's ever been, and there are a lot of strong opinions out there, and not all of them are verified by facts, and that includes everything from, you know, articles that are published in fake news to, highly, influential people that are, providing both advice or
And if you
guidance or
see that,
opinion.
and if you see that dash that comes out of ChatGPT in an article, then you know that it was AI generated, right?
And no, that really does, and that environment really does complicate things. And the idea of legitimacy in the corporate world is, uh, you know, is probably going to be one of the biggest questions of 2026 in my mind, because
Interesting.
we look to our, current administration for truth and legitimacy. We look to our, each political party or our social and community organizations. We look to the news, all of which have been undermined by this fighting. And corporations are sort of in the, caught in the crosshairs. Even our
Yeah,
universities are caught in the crosshairs. So
yeah,
how can businesses create legitimacy around not just their offers, but who they are, what they stand for, who they serve?
yeah,
And when they take a big step to the side and they depart from that, you have situations like Jaguar where it's not an authentic brand communication. It's speaking to audiences that are confused because that's not, that's not the Jaguar I know, and creates and it's a merciless community, right? You would take a misstep and everyone knows about it quickly, and you're lit up. So once again, it is about a relationship, and it is about being your true self and communicating that way. And with AI, where you've got so many different elements happening really quickly, uh, that's legitimacy is going to be for corporations a big question, and it starts
yeah.
with technology.
Yeah, I love that insight, Robert, right? And so, Brian, I know we're going to talk. I mean, we've already started to talk about privacy and security, and I know that's at the heart of what you do there at AdData. But talk about privacy and security through this lens of legitimacy. I mean, how do those, in a lot of ways, privacy and security are two sides of kind of the same coin in a lot of ways. But it's not just having it, but then keeping it secure. So, how do you see that tension of privacy and security through this lens of legitimacy that Robert just teased out?
Yeah, I think there's some really interesting and in some cases conflicting trends at play as it pertains to AI policy or lack thereof, as well as privacy and security. So, like from a privacy and security perspective, at least in the U.S., we're somewhat fractured in terms of, kind of a patchwork of different state regulations, and um, there's, an overall best practices at play in terms of consumer consent and opt out. At the same time, it's at least as of today, it's still sort of the Wild West as it pertains to AI. and ingestion of content and things of that nature. Now, maybe in 3 or 4 years that starts to get settled a little bit, um, but it's really kind of an interesting time to be in where both as a data company like ourselves or as a marketer, um, it's a really fractured environment.
Hmm.
As it pertains to privacy, I think the way I like to look at it is, and I'm not a compliance person. Of course, you always want to adhere to the letter of the law, but I think in general, if you elevate one step above that and look at what's the intent of what's trying to be done, if I was to dumb it down, it's like, don't be a jerk. Don't treat the customer with respect. um, Allow them, be transparent. Market to people that want to be marketed to. Don't market to them if they tell you to stop. And they have a right to know if their data is being used. And at a high level, most state privacy laws, that's a summary of it. And so, you could distill it down to just be a respectful actor, be a good steward of the consumers you want to interact with. And I think the organizations that do put that at the forefront of what they do are going to be the ones that thrive,
Brian,
built that level of trust.
I love this point because as much as we want to talk about what AI is going to do for us, we also have to acknowledge what it will not be able to do, at least not in the near future. And one, it is not going to be the ethical and moral barometer for where our companies, where our communities, where our government, et cetera, are going. And that is a role that we have to play.
Yeah.
It's it's only going to understand human interaction at a rudimentary level. It will not have the same degree of empathy or understanding that one human has to another.
Yeah.
And those kinds of attributes that we're dealing with a very strong, powerful child. There are lots of books and films. I know Frankenstein is
Good
trending
old Mary
on
Shelley is
is
back
trend
at the
right,
forefront as
right. It's
we.
trending on Netflix, and we watched it the other night, and I'm like, wow, this really it brought the book back. And here we have this
Yeah.
innocent, strong, powerful, childlike character, the monster
Yeah.
that is learning from us,
Yeah.
and
Well,
good, bad, and ugly.
good, bad, and ugly. Well, and Brian, I appreciate raising the point, and I'm going to give it back to you because it looks like you have a thought too. But like, for as fast as we're moving into the future, right, we're kind of moving back to the past, which is good old-fashioned marketing truisms are still true, even with all the technology enablers that we have, from identity all the way up through AI.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be exciting to see where we are in 5 years or 10 years, and you know, it'll be radically different and more improved from where we are today. But like, if you think on the case of generative AI and kind of the slop of articles that are out there today that are AI generated, I think there was a stat. It was either earlier this year or maybe even the tail end of last year, where the majority of web content is actually AI created now versus human created. I think most people would argue, if you start to read an AI article or you watch a YouTube AI generated video, it's pretty clear the message is being generated by AI. And so, at least as of today, both on the generative content as well as it pertains to data, um, I think it's a great tool. But as Robert said, it's like a really powerful child. Like, you don't want to put that child in charge of your marketing program and send it out into the world. You could ask it advice and you curate it and get feedback and use it as a tool, and it works excellent for that. Be it with generative AI or if you're building models. At least as of today, you need to review it. You have to coach it and make sure it's doing what you want to do. Now, maybe in the future, AI agents get so good that it's indistinguishable from the average person, but I think we're still a ways away from that today.
Yeah. No, it's a
Yeah.
great point, Brian. And when I think about it, for folks that go to exec.org, both to learn more about us, but there's also some great content from other sessions. And because you're evoking some thoughts here, Brian, and I want to come to you, Robert, with this too. But like, this idea of risk, right, which is something that we talk about with the chief security officer for MasterCard, right? Like, risk for them with first party, second party, third party is who's going to get in and get the data, right? Which in their case is payment data and such, right? And all the rest. But what I'm seeing teased out between the two of you in this conversation is this whole notion of risk of legitimacy, right? like the hack is slightly different than that security hack at a MasterCard, right? Now it's a hack of authenticity, and that's where AI can go awry. Am I headed somewhere logical, Robert, or do you want to cut me off as fast as you can?
No, 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 no. Security, privacy, data integrity, trust, these are table stakes. And when you mess those up,
Yep.
you need to react in the right way to fix it and be very transparent and open and direct with your customers in order to preserve a relationship. The same
Yeah.
way if you deal with your kids or your friends or your significant other or what have you. It's just, the basics. However, legitimacy is something else, especially today, where we all are desperate for not just a better understanding of the world we're living in, but wow, why does that person hold such a radically different point of view, and they're so determined to get it across, and our sources of data come from illegitimate places. I love looking at the citations and footnotes on a Perplexity or a ChatGPT or Claude or what have you, because these are some of the most ridiculous sources you could ever imagine. Now, on one hand, marketers are trying to figure out, all right, well, LLM search is not in the paid world. We can't get there yet. Maybe it's about creating massive amounts of content. Maybe it's about somehow doing research studies and publishing them in conjunction with universities. And these will be more, maybe we invest more in earned media and PR in order to, hit more, get more articles, pay some influencers. That isn't necessarily driving legitimacy when it comes to who you are, what you stand for, what you are providing to your customers,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
keeping that focus narrow. I think what Brian was just saying about AI agents is exactly right. When they are operating at their best, they're usually performing a single function. Right? We are just answering your questions about this one topic, right? You want to know what your bank balance is and how to reset your password, or you want to send a return back and you need the label information. And suddenly you don't know the difference between a human and AI, and you don't care.
Yeah.
When
And that's yeah.
when you step beyond that and suddenly, oh, this agent is going to take care of my entire recruiting, suddenly no one wants to work at your company because there's something not quite right. It
It's
actually
not authentic and not legitimate.
not,
But
yeah,
it's a
right,
yeah, it's a
right.
great point, Robert. And this is a good point to pivot kind of to the people side of this, because that's what we're teasing out, right? Like, how does the legitimacy of the data, right? Like you've talked about with what data does around identity and everything else, Brian, ensure the legitimacy of the message. But what we've seen in a lot of our sessions at Exec is that exact point that you've been making, Robert, which is, AI is an enabler of what the humans do, right? Which brings us back to humans. So Brian, when you look across the landscape of the skill sets that marketing organizations need today, like that balance between the marketers and the digital marketers and data scientists, right? Like you're calling your data to get signals with AI at data. What does the people side of this look like as far as skill sets and how that's evolving?
I, I think, whether we were having the same question today or even 20 years ago, I would probably answer it somewhat similar, which is, people can learn skills, but it's difficult to learn to be intellectually curious. And so I think regardless of how the landscape shifts in terms of what AIs can do or not do, I think at the heart of it as a person and for the people that an organization would look to recruit, finding the right individual that is intellectually curious and willing to learn what they don't know, I think that's going to be key because to be honest, the landscape is changing so fast. We may all feel like we've got a great handle on the current state of the art, but in 2 years or even 1 year, that's going to be totally different. And so I think no longer can someone come in and say, okay, I know this platform, I know how to onboard here, and I know how to publish to this. That's great knowledge and good to understand, but it's going to continue to evolve and change. So I think finding people that are interested in going on a journey and learning and continuing to be at the cusp of it, I think that's going to be the key.
Yeah, I mean, Robert, I'm curious that same question from your lens, working with all these brands like you do. I'm sure the folks that are in the room as you're working on strategy with your clients includes an interesting mix of folks. So who's in the room these days and who should be in the room these days?
Yeah, I mean, the marketing function is, I mean, it needs to be deeply connected to strategy because ultimately, we're talking about the translation of your business goals, your business strategy into campaigns or communications or initiatives that meet that address those, right? That answer those.
Hmm.
And then when it comes to actual deployment execution, that also it takes a village, right? And the wide range of touch points with customers or any audience. Today a marketing department is responsible for internal communications and to recruit and retain the best talent. It's responsible for managing partnerships and finding new partners within an ecosystem, and is of course responsible for uh, developing and nurturing and growing the customer base and those returns. So a lot of people should be in the room, but not all at once. This is a very strange time where remembering that strategic focus at 1,000 different kinds of executions is really difficult and complex. In
Mm.
the same way, I'll ask Brian. We used to have only a few ways of communicating with each other. You could send a telegram or a letter, Pony Express. Today, at one time, email was and still is to a large degree a amazing platform for connecting with people and getting them to take an action. In the same way, search has been an amazing platform and continues to be. But we're all saying, wow, the days of email may be limited because we have all of these other platforms and communications tools. Or the age of search may be over because we've got these LLM search platforms coming and what have you. Each one will evolve and change. But the fundamental principles, to Brian's point, do remain the same. What are you saying to whom, at what time, about what, and how is that delivered?
Yeah.
We're in a video first culture. Okay, maybe a static email seems old school rather than a TikTok piece that really has some virility to it. But
Yeah. It,
they
it,
all carry with them the same message.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting point of view. And Brian, I mean, you're on the front lines of this, right? I mean, I mean, that data is, got, I think, about as many years of history as exec does of being experts in this world of email addresses being the core of identity. But how has that transformed with all of these other touch points, and how do you see it evolving next?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think email's going anywhere anytime soon, but it's maybe evolved to, if back, to your comment about Telegram, Robert, like perhaps postal email has maybe taken on that role more so today, and emails become maybe a more structured means of communication, whereas, people that want to have quick little sidebar discussions, they're talking through Slack or through some type of instant messenger, or maybe perhaps on TikTok or something like that, or other social media channels. I guess if I was to abstract what we're talking about here, really it's human communications are at the core of what we're talking about, and it's meeting people where they are and talking to them in the right voice with the right level of trust and the right platform. And back to the question about what type of employees you might bring in.
Mm.
Beyond someone that's intellectually curious, and I agree, somebody with a strategic mind is certainly going to be key. I think really someone that's a good communicator is going to be key, because as we get into the future,
Mm.
we're going to have a choice as consumers. Do I want to talk to the AI or do I want to talk to the person? And frankly, I have that choice today. If I go to Panera, do I want to enter it in on a touch screen or do I want to go talk to the person?
Mm.
I personally, if I go to Panera, I go there because I want to interact with the person. If I wanted to interact with the machine, I'd maybe order it online. Well,
Mm.
today we think about that maybe, as that's a simple stripped down view of it. But in the near future, we may have those choices internally in an organization. Do I talk to the AI chatbot, or do I talk to, John down the hall, or whoever it is? And I
Mm.
think being very versed in communications and understanding how the consumer or how your coworker wants to receive those communications, and being very fluent at talking to them, I think that's going to be a main differentiator for us
Right.
as humans going forward.
And
Yeah, well,
consistency across those touch points. In other words, what you get from an AI or a self-serve website or app, what you get from a push communication or a live conversation has to be consistent, true to the brand, and know enough about you to be dangerous, but not so much to be, as in Gary's words, creepy.
yeah, well, and it kind of points out, the idea that the email address, the email, and what is said in the email are actually three different things, right? And so, even if you know you've got the right person, right, because you've got the identity and you've got a mechanism by which to reach them, whether it's email or TikTok, what you say, to your point, Brian, still matters, right? And that legitimacy and authenticity that you talked about earlier. So we've talked a lot about tech and marketing and the people within the marketing stack, but and I'll start with you, Robert, on this one first, but then come to you, Brian. But like the relationship of the CMO with everybody else in the C-suite, right? Because I mean, exec is very much a people organization, and so the people that are interacting around these decisions, of course, include the CFO now and the CIO and everything else. So what do those conversations look for like for your clients, Robert?
Well, I don't envy the CMO. Although I know a number of really amazing ones. They typically are smarter than most and more hardworking and diligent, more connected. And yet, what's on their plate, what they're responsible for, is a lot, and it's complex. Um, I don't envy them. I do agree that the CMO has got to be not just deeply connected to the CEO and in the boardroom. The decisions they're making really today are really determining the future of the businesses that they're involved with. And
Hmm.
I have no doubt about that. Their contributions really, not just legitimacy, but relevancy in their market categories. Um, and the things that they do impact everything, and not just generating business, but how much does that business cost, and what's it bringing in, and what's the
Hmm.
long term positioning around it, and how does it impact shareholder value, and so many other things. And
Yeah.
so I think there's amongst some CMOs a default to the tried and true. If I spend 500K on search, I know what I'm going to get back, and I'm going to be able to predict and put that into my spreadsheet. And so the CMO is also managing this business in a way where, well, I need a certain amount of predictability, and I need a certain amount of, shoot the moon, and then a certain amount of risk avoidance and risk tolerance here. So, yeah, it's a tough role, a lot of considerations, and there's no, it's not, confusing to see why technology has become both the CMO's best friend, right? When it's predictable, you put a certain amount of money in and you're going to get a certain amount of results back, and there are associated assets, and why it is also infuriating,
Yeah.
because it's the source of the biggest headaches. All issues and crises today, not all, but there's some
Yeah.
CEOs in handcuffs, but the majority of them are coming because one of the tech things screwed up and didn't deliver it the right way, or there's an outage or what have you. And those are just awful.
Yeah, and Brian, I mean, when your clients come to you for these decisions and conversations about like how to balance the investments, I mean, what's your best practices that you're seeing out there? What advice would you give kind of along those lines that Robert was taking us down?
Yeah, well, just to touch on something Robert said around, kind of the traditional CMO view of, there's a formulaic approach to doing SEO, SEM, where, you perhaps know the spend you might want to put into search and that type of thing. The challenge that we face right now, and a CMO definitely faces, is search is evolving quickly. Even if you go to look at Google, they're slowly and surely integrating Gemini into all the responses to where, 5 years from now, ad supported search is going to be radically different and probably diminished and eclipsed with different models. And
Mm.
so the way a CMO can perhaps get beyond that is really through a deeper C-suite partnership with their CTO, making sure they've got the right level of integrations, the right level of signals, behavioral insights on their consumers that become enablers. And it's challenging because that takes a lot more strategy and planning, and it's a longer term approach. But by making that investment into an organization's data set, it helps future proof where things are going to go, because it's going to get to the point in the future where you can't just throw ad dollars at search and all of a sudden see a ramp up in your traffic anymore. If you haven't made those investments in your identity stack, or if it's in the articles that you're publishing, in terms of brand building, getting yourself ingested as a source of trust within AIs, that has to be done way in advance. It can't be done, just at an immediate campaign level.
Yeah, and what I would suggest to our guests that are watching, that will be watching this conversation, which has been a great one, Robert, Brian, both of you, like just terrific insights, especially where they overlap too, right? Like really interesting insights. We did a visionary vault actually with Linda Boff, who again, for the folks who are here at the beginning, sends her apologies. Travel is still, you can't AI travel. There's still a plane involved, and they still have gates, and sometimes plainly so gates at the right time. But Linda, who is the former CMO of GE and the CMO of the Americas for Microsoft, did a session together. So I would suggest to folks one of two things: either watch that first to get that set of insights, then come watch this and feed all of this great thinking from Brian and Robert into that lens, or vice versa, right? Because these two things go so well together as to like the really critical decisions that folks need to make going into 2026. Looking at the clock and knowing that we're getting to that point where I kind of asked some closing questions. So I'm going to ask the first of the closing questions. If there were just two things that you could suggest, Brian, to a marketing organization or to an identity organization for 2026, like do these two things, what would those be for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing would be the table stakes, the security, privacy, like that. You have to do that. You have to be at the top of that. It's not something you do begrudgingly. It's something that's the cost of doing business. And so that's first. And the second is really thinking forward about what the AI strategy looks like for the business. Not just in terms of product and functionality, but like disruption. Like how do you future proof your business? Do you have the right AI signals and the right insights on your consumers that will carry you past where we are today from the marketing ecosystem and into the future, so that you have a really deep understanding and a deep relationship with your consumers?
Yeah, and that same question for you, Robert. But when you do your two things, I know one, I want through the lens of what you do for your clients already at Hudson Cutler, right? Like the strategic stuff. But if you were to also give them a second thing saying, and as you do the strategic stuff, the way to think, not what to do with the tech, right? But the way to think about the tech. If I can guide you that much, I'd love
Yeah,
your thoughts.
and I'll start with the second first. And I would say, try it. And when I say
Mm.
try it, trials, whether they're public or private, whether they're limited or expansive, today are essential, because we're seeing across the board every single marketing function that you've relied on through your career, you're seeing the law of diminishing returns. They're just not working the way they used to. It's not to say they're not working. And in some cases, they can be incredibly effective, and they're far more powerful than they ever were. But there are lots of advancements across the board: new technologies, new processes, new audiences. Try.
Yep.
You keep your core the same, and you try them. That is what most of the largest organizations are slow to do,
Mm.
because they're risk averse. They're doing it the way it's always been done, and they're getting what they've always got. But in a world where you need to always grow and always make more, that's a problem. And that's a problem ultimately for the CMO. And then the second is sort of a combination of the table stakes, and table stakes are always going to be table stakes of, what CYA is happening. But these table stakes are bigger now. It really is less focused on your offer and your product. And it's this bigger idea of something like relationship, or your why, or your reason for being, or your place in the world. And some of these questions get a little fluffy, but the best questions of, who are we, what do we stand for, what are we delivering, what is our lane, are super important. And it's easy to forget in the heat of battle that this is a big campaign, not one,
I didn't
squeaky.
just push the button, to Brian's point earlier, like do the mass splash, right?
Yeah.
So looking at the clock, I know that we're going to want to include in the follow-up email, speaking of email, Brian, that we'll be doing with your team, the white paper that you talked about. But my last question is, what resources would you suggest folks go to, like the white paper that we'll send, to kind of keep up with the latest trends? What website or what resource do you go to learn? And then the second one, a little more personal, what books on your shelf to read as we head into the Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays that's just fun, that's not part of all of this world that we live in. So Brian, you get to go first.
Sure. Like in terms of resources, again, you referenced some of the information that we're going to be putting out at data. So I would maybe start there, and we'll of course share that link out. I do think AI in itself is a great resource, but it's almost like the early days of Wikipedia, where
Mm.
you can use it for information discovery, but I wouldn't necessarily trust everything you see there. So I use it, and I think a lot of others use it as well for discovery purposes in terms of
Mm.
research, but it requires corroboration and verification through more trusted searches.
Checking the sources, like Robert was talking about a little bit earlier, right? Yeah, yeah. And what's
Yeah.
what's the fun book on the shelf?
I don't know if I'd call it fun, but I'm reading a book on learning Python. So um,
And that is why you are the VP of products at AtData, and everybody should be really glad you're reading that book. I love it. Yeah, my late wife unfortunately used to say, "Honey, that's one of your books. I'm going to keep my fun books over here on this side table." Well, Brian, appreciate that insight, and appreciate you and at Data making this possible, and working with your team as well. And we can't wait to get this conversation out to a lot of the folks in our community. There's a lot of great insights here. Robert, same question for you. What's your go-to for finding out stuff and keeping track of things, and what you reading?
I'm reading Some People Deserve Killing, or Need Killing, Pat Evangelista's book. She's
Man, going into the holidays with that much family around the Thanksgiving table, I don't know if people
uh,
should be reading that right now. I don't
I'm telling
know.
you, it's great. So she's a reporter in the Philippines. This is primarily about the Duarte administration. I'm learning so much. She's a great writer. I had no expectations in picking it up, and I cannot put it down. I only started it day before yesterday. I'm almost done, and I want it to keep going. Fascinating and powerful. What was the other question?
Like how you keep track. Yeah. After that, I don't know. I can't
How I
remember the
keep track.
question. Yeah,
I
like
mean,
just resources that you consider as go-tos. I mean,
exec, of
Brian's,
course,
huh?
peer-to-peer networking,
Yeah.
exec, vault sessions, a lot of other industry resources that put me together with other people that are sitting in my
Yeah.
shoes. I pick up the phone and talk to them old school.
Yeah, you know what? It's a really good point. To end, especially since we're going into a season where we're going to be spending a lot of time with people, mostly, family and friends. Really, the biggest resource at the end of the day for all the conversations we had about tech and for all the conversations we had about AI, it's still about people.
Mhm.
And on behalf of exec, again, Brian, thank you for your insights as VP of Products and for making it possible. Robert, for being a long-term time friend of the council, as well as just your insights, doing what you do so well for your clients as well as us. We are also a client of Hudson Cutler and benefit from those insights. So happy holidays to everyone. We'll get a follow-up out. We'll get this propagated so people can learn from it. And really appreciate the session. Hope everybody has a great rest of the week and a great holiday.
Thank you. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, bye.